Hey guys, hope you're all doing well. Today going to be bringing you along on another adventure of a Minimoog restoration, and this is a pretty unhappy Minimoog, I'm not going to lie to you. But what we have here is a 1974 Minimoog that belongs to Doug. So I kind of got the story from Doug about this one as far as how it was when he got it, and basically the story is that he had to replace the cabinet. So this is actually a brand new cabinet, which is why it looks so great. It actually had termite damage. So this one had termite damage, and so he bought a new cabinet, put everything over the new cabinet, and I think that's really as far as he really got with it. It just doesn't play. The only thing that works right on this unit is the 440 Hertz. So that just kind of gives you an idea of where we're starting with this one. But you can see I've already pulled some things apart, just doing visual inspections and doing some diagnostics, just kind of seeing what works and kind of where we need to kind of look, and just take some obvious stuff, you know, power supply voltages, that kind of stuff, and make sure there's nothing that could cause catastrophic failure powering it up, you know, when it comes in here. So I'll show you what this thing does. So here's what it sounds like. The only oscillator that's working is oscillator 2, and it's not working correctly. Our envelope doesn't work right. So we can bring that up so it's going to sustain. But oscillator so basically you can hear it does not sound right at all, tuning wise or anything else. Oscillator 1 is dead in the water. It's flatlined. I've looked at it with a scope. It's not running at all. Oscillator 3 is running at 76 kilohertz, which you can see on the scope right there. So if I can zoom in right there, 76 kilohertz. So that's oscillator 3. So oscillator 3 is working, but it is not doing anything except running 76 kilohertz. I already checked some of the basic stuff. It's not that. It's in the actual oscillator, probably the switching circuitry and the timing circuitry for the oscillator. The filter doesn't sound right. It does work, but it just don't sound right. You can have a kind of little ping it has in it, and we have the envelope turned down. There's no envelope on it. We can set the attack. You can still hear it. So it doesn't sound right at all there. And also something else, if we turn the oscillator off, we have it turned all the way down, you can hear that little ping in the filter real good. It has key tracking on, but that's in key tracking. So yeah, that filter's not working right either. So we got filter problems, but you can also hear a bleed through. So we got all the oscillators, they're all turned to 0. You can still hear oscillator 2. Seems like it's a sawtooth only. But that is something else that's going on with it. I'll turn it back down here. I got it turned up just a little bit there. So here's with the filter open. Also, the noise source works, but it does have a bit of distortion in it. So you can hear right there. It almost sounds like Randy's Minimoog, the same one we had the filter issue on earlier. It's just got a little too much saturation in the pink noise, so probably a filtering issue in that circuit. But I'll take you around back and just kind of show you what's in this thing. And something else that Doug also did is he bought a version 2 oscillator board, because this one would have originally had a version 2 oscillator board, but somebody put in the version 3, which the version 3 is super solid in tuning, but it takes away really from the phasing that you get from this oscillator board here. So it tends to sound a little bit thinner, and you can actually have cancellations as the phases interact. So even though they're still analog oscillators, so they still have a slight phase if you calibrate them right, but they do kind of cancel. So that's an issue with the version 3. So he went back with a version 2 oscillator board. He bought this board, and it's actually an RA Moog incorporated board, so it's earlier revision than what this Minimoog would have had. And of course, so we're also fighting just the idea that this is a used oscillator board and so we got to repair it on its own self, basically. But also, guys, if you put a version 2 oscillator into a Minimoog that has a version 3 oscillator, there's things you have to do. And one of the things is you have to add a resistor back across the range switch. There's one resistor you have to add. And of course this one was left in there, so I was able to re-tack it in. But it changes the load of your range switches, which affect this oscillator board differently from the version 3. So you have to keep that in mind. But the only thing I say that's really been done in this one as far as, maintenance or anything, it has had the rectifier capacitors replaced, which I brought that up on Randy's Minimoog. So you guys can go check that out if you're curious about what all that does. This one has had a little chassis damage. You can see it's evidently been dropped right here on this corner. And it did actually warp everything up right here a little bit. Not quite like that warp Minimoog I showed a couple of weeks ago. But you can see the side here where it took a hard lick right there. So that's really about the only chassis damage that I see. It's had a new fuse holder put in here, which I'll be changing that back to a factory style fuse holder. It's got a 1 amp fuse in it, so I have a high suspicion it's probably blowing half amp fuses. So I just went with the extra 500 milliamps to compensate for the blowing fuses. So that could be part of our problem as well. It could be something pulling current, and it could be causing this problem. But I did calibrate the power supply, so we've got 10 volts plus negative, and so all that looks good. But yeah, we've got some work cut out for us on this one. But this actually was built in October 30th, 1974, and it's serial number 6036. So it's 6036 here, and of course you can see where the scale octave shift was written for the version 3 oscillator board for calibration purposes. But now all we got is range and scale, and that's all you really have to do with this one, and then the octave, which is where you calibrate your range switches. Basically how that works. But anyways, just gonna bring you guys on another adventure of another Minimoog here, and you guys might enjoy seeing the pre-restoration here, and of course I'll bring you guys along on the adventure here. But will be more to come. Alright, so just some updates on the Minimoog here. I've went to the oscillator board, hadn't done a restoration on it, just strictly getting it working and doing a few things to kind of improve it. Also testing some components in it. Some things that are hard to get. I'm trying some different components. But what ended up having is it had a few failures. Some of the op amps had failed, of course. That's a real common thing. We had a bad transistor and a bad temp code resistor. So those, and also I just went on putting new timing capacitors in there. And we'll be doing some other things in the restoration of this board to really improve it. But you can hear how it works. We'll go around here and I'll let you hear this thing. So as you can hear, this is all 3 oscillators. But now tracking is not in because I hadn't done a restoration, so you'll notice that the ranges are not right. So it's got the oscillators working. All the waveforms. Like I say, once I do a restoration on it, this thing will be much more stable. Sorry, the train's going by outside. Anyways, just want to give you an update on the oscillator board. That's all I've touched. Still got the filter issues, still got all the other problems. But just focus on the oscillator first. Trying to get that all working. Now I'm going to move to the filter, get it working correctly, and just progress here, and then we'll go back over the boards again, do the restoration. Alright, so I now got this Minimoog all complete, just about, and got it working like it's supposed to here. Boy, this thing put up a battle. Let me tell you, this was not easy. This was a really challenging Minimoog. So what made this one kind of a challenge too was that this one had a version 3 oscillator board in it, and it was removed and then it was shipped with this board, and this was an unknown condition board. So I had to figure out what was oscillator problems, if there was something in the chassis that was wrong. And so it just kind of left kind of an open hole for me as a technician trying to figure out, do we have continuity issues in the harness? Do we have issues in the board? You know, so it kind of opened up a big door of troubleshooting, and just in that sense of having this board that's unknown. So I did find a few things. So what ended up happening was we did have some resistors out on the rotary switch for the footages, which is, you know, not uncommon. I see it every once in a while. But the big issue I had, and I didn't even notice this in the just the, you know, getting it working stage, just the repair stage, was I did a rough calibration, but I didn't do a really tight calibration until after I did the restoration on it. And it calibrated okay. It was, you know, not holding real well. Well, we had a storm come through, and we had the humidity in my shop kind of went up, and I came in and realized this thing was completely out of tune, and I could just touch the board, just the corner of the board, and the oscillators would go erratic. And so that let me know real quick that this board had contamination problems. And so what I had to do is I depopulated the board, all the parts I just replaced. I pulled, you know, anything that was, you know, thermally sensitive, or I didn't want damage from just the rarity of the chip. I ended up soaking the board in alcohol, baking it out, and I bake them out for about 2 hours. Then I repopulate it and got this board fixed. So it's now working like it's supposed to. So took care of that. Last little issue it did have was after I did all that was I could touch the board just down here, and it would all three oscillators would kind of lose tuning a little bit. Found a cracked solder joint, so not a big deal there. Took care of that, and it's all fixed. So that was the oscillator board. So that was one battle. The next battle was actually the VCF in this one. So as you heard earlier, it didn't sound real good. Something didn't sound right about it. And so I did the obvious stuff, like I see these film caps go bad, which usually causes a resonance problem, self-oscillation issues, and of course some of those were out of tolerance. So replace those, kind of, you know, just assumed I had it fixed because that's what I always see in these filters. No, that wasn't it. It calibrated, it would hold calibration. When I put the back cover on though, which is one reason I do a lot of testing with the cover on, cover off, when you put the cover on, you get more of a thermal accuracy because everything's kind of enclosed, so the heat of the power supply kind of, you know, fills this area. And the calibration points bottomed out. I could not get this thing to track the keyboard at all. And it would track, you know, as far as like actually function as far as the tracking goes, but it was not anywhere near where it was supposed to be at. And the scale trim was bottomed out by the time I even got close to being in tune. And so I ended up pulling this back apart, and the filter still didn't sound right either. And so I knew I had kind of a problem, but sometimes it's easier to give it time to kind of figure things out. I kind of give my mind time to think. And so what I ended up doing was I ended up pulling this filter board out after I had that issue. And the current source transistors were completely out from each other. You're supposed to have a 2 millivolt tolerance, a 2 millivolt difference between them. We had about 20 millivolts difference between them, so they were nowhere near close. So then I started checking all these other transistors. In the ladder, I just like to make sure everything's kind of matched because it does affect the harmonics. So I checked all these, and none of those were matched either. They were all within 10, 11, 12 millivolts apart from each other. So I ended up setting up, and I ended up checking and matching a bunch of transistors for this thing, and I actually replaced them with TIS97s. So this one actually has TIS97 transistors in it. Moog didn't always use TIS97s. A lot of people have the misconception that Moog would stick with these one transistors, but they use several things. I've even seen 2N3392s in Minimoogs. So 2N3392 transistors. This one had 18, I want to say it was 18238E transistors, which I didn't have any match sets for. That's why I just wanted to put a whole new set in there matched, because I didn't have any of those. Don't really know what those are. You can't really find a data sheet on them either. So replaced all these with match sets. Took care of the current source issue and got that all fixed. And then the next thing, so this was kind of in a weird order. It wasn't that first, but after I got the oscillator all fixed, I started just doing some, checking the calibration, the accuracy of the calibration. I started to notice I had these little dips and things that would happen in the power, and some like ripple effect. And so I went over here, and you saw earlier that this had been recapped. Well, the values were not right. Somebody put the wrong value caps in this thing. They put a lot higher microfarad than what this thing requires, and so it just had too much ripple. And so went on and replaced the capacitors, the rectifier diodes, because they had not been replaced yet anyways, so went on and did that. And then in the process of doing all that, I was going to go and check the fuses, because typically when I see this kind of stuff, I see the wrong fuse installed, because it usually blows fuses. So I went to check the fuse, and the fuse holder was actually broke internally. It's a wonder this chassis didn't come alive with high voltage, because that thing was cracked right at where it would touch the metal, and luckily it just didn't. So I had to replace the fuse holder. I didn't have the correct fuse holder for this era, so I had this one in stock and put it in there. I was going to replace this one with the correct fuse style, but somebody bored the hole out when they put this one in. It's got a lot larger thread diameter, so they bored the hole out, so I couldn't put the original style in there anyway. So it was fun. Needless to say, this has been a fun Minimoog. But I've got this thing sounding like it's supposed to sound like, and it plays really great. And I think I'll be very happy with it, Doug. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to finish putting this thing back together. I got the bottom chassis put on. I've got to put the back cover on. I'm going to give it a little bit of burning time, and then I'm going to shoot the actual final audio demo of this thing for you. But anyways, be back here soon. Alright, I got this Minimoog all back together. I'm just going to give you guys a quick walk around and so you can see everything, Doug. But this one here, I didn't really bother replacing the interface panel, even though it's got some cracks and things in it, mainly because the chassis is really warped at that end, so I didn't really want to get into that. But I just cleaned everything up really good. I took the knobs off, cleaned all the knobs. Also replaced some of the inserts for some of the knobs that were missing, the little chrome insert. Cleaned all the pots, as mentioned. The only thing I didn't have to do to this one, which was kind of nice considering the fact I had to do so much work to the electronics, was somebody had already rebuilt the keyboard assembly. So the keyboard assembly has already been rebuilt, so I didn't have to go into the keyboard and rebuild it. So that saved a little bit of time there just in the keyboard. But I did clean up the connections. It had Since Jones connectors, and that somebody had re-soldered them at some point, and they just looked really frayed and nasty. So I cleaned all that up and re-soldered everything with fresh solder and new wire. So there's no issues with connection there. But I'll give you a walk around here. Like I say, it's brand new chassis, so the chassis is actually brand new. So it looks really good. But something else I did also for you is I actually plugged the holes, because this was had a version 3 oscillator at one point in time. So I plugged all these holes with some little plugs, and that way you don't have any air blowing into your oscillator board. It'll just kind of help everything be more stable with this version 2 oscillator board. So did that for you. This is your serial number, 6036. Just going to show you that real quick. But cleaned everything up really good. So everything's really good and clean. All new hardware, so all the hardware was mismatched on this one, and or missing hardware in places, so I put all new hardware in it, and just cleaned everything up really good. Really just kind of detailed it the best I could. Like I say, you can see you got some cracks and stuff in this interface, but if you look at this thing, it's actually bowed. You can kind of see it right there. It's kind of got a bow in it. Not quite as severe as the Minimoog I just recently replaced all the guts out of a 73 into, but it's definitely been hit on this corner, so you can kind of see that. But it did clean up really well. Just cleaned everything up, and like I say, I think you're gonna be really happy with this thing. But anyways, let me put the camera on the tripod here, and I'll make you guys a sound demo. Alright, so I'm first just going to start by showing you a sound with everything combined, just like I typically do, just so you can hear this thing as a whole. So you hear how great that filter sounds, how good the oscillators sound. Everything's very solid in this unit now. So here we go. anyways, you hear how great everything sounds together. Now I'm going to turn the filter. I'm going to open it up here so you can hear the oscillators here. We'll go through the oscillators first. So oscillator 1 only. So I'll show you the waveforms, the footages. Clean the volume pot. Here's oscillator 1, here's oscillator 2. Here's oscillator 2, here's oscillator 3. And I'll go back and show you that the oscillator detunes work for oscillator 2 and 3. So here's oscillator 2, here's oscillator 3. There's all 3 oscillators on again. So there's our oscillators. So you can kind of just create that sounds. I'll show you the ranges kind of in between. You heard them a little bit there, but with the filter open. See how great those oscillators work? Also, I fixed the noise source, so here's your noise source. Good clean volume control. And there's your noise source. Now I'll show you your filter. So we got everything turned down here. I'll turn down the envelope generators, everything's off here. We'll make this filter self-oscillate. So here's just your filter. This is where I spend a lot of the time on that filter, getting it to track correctly. Of course, we can turn tracking off. There's just your filter with tracking. Sorry about the train coming by outside. This train get by real quick. So anyways, here it is with tracking 1 only. Here's tracking 2 only. When they're combined, you get full tracking. And there's your filter. So that filter's working fantastic. So I'll show you right quick the envelope generator works. So we got everything set to 0 in the contour. So I'll bring out the amount of contour. So here it's just a click right now. We'll bring up some decay time. Bring it down frequency. So here decay time there. We've got the attack time. As you can see, and then we've also got the sustain level. So you can see right now if I let off a note, I got everything set to 0. It's just a click. So there it is with the sustain level turned up a little bit. So there's your filter. So open your filter back up, we'll turn the oscillators back on. We'll use all three oscillators. I'll show you that your loudness control works. We'll set everything to 0 here in the loudness controller. So here's the loudness controller set to 0. It's just going to be a click, as you can hear. So we'll bring up the decay. Here you have some decay time there. So there's your decay. We got the attack. Set everything back to 0. So you can hear your attack time, and we also got the sustain level. And you can bring this up just a little bit. I always bring this up, but you can get kind of a percussive. This keeps it from completely dying out. So you get something like that. Also, your decay switch does work over here, so I've set the decay up for us. So I flip the switch off. It's just like having the decay set to 0 with some sustain. But if you hold in the key, it's going to fall out the decay. As you can hear. So there's your control generators, your filter, your oscillators. I'll show you now your modulation section, so we'll just make a sound real quick. Let me get something set up here. So we'll modulate the oscillators first. So here's your oscillators modulating off oscillator 3. So we can also inject noise into that using the mod mix. So anyways, you can hear that. That's your modulation of your oscillators. We can also modulate the filter. So we'll go back here. So anyways, you can hear your oscillators there, or your modulation section. Same thing here, we can inject noise into the filter as well. It's more useful in the filter. See what you can hear all that works. So it works really well. I'll just bring it up. Now I got the oscillators pretty well tuned together, so it's kind of flat, but when you detune these oscillators a little bit, and of course you have the version 2 oscillator board now, so it's going to drift a little bit naturally, but you detune this thing just a hair and it really comes alive. So you can hear how that works. That's your glide you're hearing there. I'm also injecting some FL modulation, just using oscillator 3 is still an audio source oscillator, and just injecting into the filter and you get this nice kind of ringing kind of effect. But I'll show you your glide right quick. You heard it a little bit, but we got the switch, we can turn it on and off. So there's without glide, we'll put glide full. There's glide full. So anyways, hear how great this Minimoog sounds. It just sounds really good. I think it's going to be very good for you, Doug. And once again, I appreciate you letting me work on this thing for you. And thank you guys for watching the video. Appreciate it. There'll be more here to come here very soon. Take care. One thing I completely forgot to show you, my mind just kind of went crazy there. I forgot to show you the actual dead zone I did for the pitch wheel. So now you've actually got a true dead center in this wheel. So I turn it to the detent and I rock it within the detent, there'll be no tuning issues. So I'll show you this real quick. So you can see there's no detuning until I get off that detent. I'm actually having to pull it out of that detent a little bit to get that change in frequency. So it makes the tuning a lot more accurate. So anyways, just want to show you that real quick. I almost forgot about that.